Top 10 Most Incredible Ancient Weapons. Before we dive deep into the history and explore some of the most incredible ancient military weapons, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on our amazing informational videos. Number 9. Urumi. Normally everyone expects a sword to have a rigid and sturdy blade made from metal, but that's not always the case, and surprisingly different designs can seem far more dangerous when used by an experienced warrior. The urumi was a sword that originated in the region that's now known as Kerala in the country of India around 1500 years ago during the Vedic era. You may know the weapon by several other names, such as the Tutuval or the Surokati, depending on where they were made, but what's common about them is that they all have a flexible, sharp blade that functions similarly to a whip measuring around 66 inches long. The hilt of the urumi was made from iron or brass, and sometimes with ornamental decorations. The blade itself was made from flexible edged steel about 1 inch or several centimeters wide across, and to work properly, the blade should be approximately the same length as the arm span of the person using it. Other iterations of this weapon also existed which had multiple blades attached to one handle, such as the Sri Lankan version of urumi that had 32 blades and was dual-wielded, so fighters would have one in each hand, as it's essentially a combination of two different weapons. The blades are whipped around and leverage centrifugal force for their power, so users didn't need to be particularly strong to inflict significant damage on an enemy. The warriors that excelled in handling the urumi were one of the most feared opponents of their time. Number 8. Shotel. Shotel traced as far back as the Demit and Ashanwa empires in the northern region of what is today modern Ethiopia. The shotel was a long curved sword similar in appearance to a sickle. The blade of the weapon is flat and double-edged and forged with a diamond-shaped cross-section. Typically, the length of the blade would have been about 40 inches, or about a meter, and the hilt was made from either wood or an animal horn, such as one from a rhino worn on the right side, and a leather scabbard. Shotels were often adorned with gems and other precious materials, and the shape allowed warriors to reach around a protective shield to target an enemy's kidneys or lungs. The upper edge of the shotel was unsharpened, and this would have allowed it to be pushed up against a shield to allow the user to try their strength to overpower the opposition. Number 7. Hwacha. This weapon was developed on the Korean peninsula in the 1400s. The word Hwacha means fire cart. This weapon was a cross between an organ gun and a multiple rocket launcher siege equipment that could fire either hundreds of rocket-powered arrows or a series of iron-head bolts. In the 1590s, Japanese Toyotomi Yoshi led 2 attempts to take control of Korea. It was used as a launch pad to overrun China too, but was met with fierce opposition from the local fighters. Historians who have studied the two wars that took place tend to believe it was the technological breakthrough of the Hwacha. Hundreds of these ancient weapons were thought to have been deployed across the peninsula, each of which was able to fire a volley of 100 rocket arrows or 200 small bullets at a time. Number 6. Macquato. The name in the Nahuatl language means handwood. The macquato was a weapon that was used across Mesoamerica. By the time of the Spanish conquest, it would have been one of the most common weapons seen by the European troops as they battled against the Aztec Maya. It was essentially a wooden block with a handle that's fairly similar in appearance to a small oar, but the sides were lined with sharp blades made from obsidian, a naturally forming volcanic glass material that's often found across South America. These measured 47 inches in length and weighed 2 to 3 kilograms, described by historians as neither a sword nor a club, but more of a saw sword. They were said to be sharp enough to decapitate a person or even a horse, and could inflict serious wounds. It was also a useful weapon for incapacitating opposing troops instead of outright killing them. This allowed the Aztec and Mayans to capture a number of enemies from war to fulfill their sacrificial needs to their gods. Number 5. Archimedes steam cannon. Archimedes was a Greek mathematician, physicist, and engineer who became an important influential person in the affairs of the island of Sicily in the 3rd century BC. The city was attacked by a number of enemies, and Archimedes designed several weapons that were far ahead of their time and helped defend against anything that the enemy could use in war. These inventions included the legendary claw machine that lifted ships from the water, and a weapon that concentrated the sun's rays against targets. But while there's a debate as to whether these were actually ever used, one weapon that certainly was real was his flaming steam cannon, made up of a large metal tube with one end placed in a furnace to increase its temperature. A projectile would be placed in and a small amount of water along with it. The water would then quickly turn to vapor. The increase in pressure would send the projectile hurling out of the pipe in the direction that the weapon was facing. Number 4. Chakram, also sometimes known as a cheli car. The chakram was a weapon that originated in the Indian subcontinent around 2,500 years ago. It was a circular throwing weapon that doubled up as a defensive device that could protect the head from melee attacks, but it really came into the limelight when it was used in offensive. It had a diameter of around 5.9 inches. A chakra made of steel could be easily thrown as far as 200 feet or about 60 meters, and ones made from brass at a range almost 120 meters. They used to be perfectly circular, and the outer edge of the rim would be sharpened. This means they would easily rip through cloth or flesh when they made contact, and a large number of them could be thrown in quick succession to drastically increase the damage. Because of their shape, they were far more accurate in hitting the targets than arrows or spears across long distances, because they weren't affected as much by the wind. Number 3. Caltrop. It's rare that the design of a weapon stands the test of time over many centuries, but caltrops can be traced back originally to being used more than 2,000 years ago, and are still sometimes relied upon in conflicts today. The basic idea is that these aerial denial weapons are made up of a series of sharp spines that are arranged in a way that no matter how they are positioned, there's always at least 2 pointing towards the ground for grip. Originally, these were used to prevent the advance of invading armies, particularly those traveling by horses, chariots, or elephants, because the spike would either injure the feet of the animals or break the wheels of the vehicles. They were even used during the Second World War. While the materials may differ, and they're now made from reinforced concrete as opposed to the metals available in ancient times. Caltrops have a similar effect on rubber tires, and if large enough can even disrupt tanks and aircraft. Number 2. Shotel. Ancient Chinese innovators and scientists were far ahead of the rest of the world in designing new weapons and methods. One of the best examples of this was the Shotel, also known as the repeater crossbow. The crossbow combines the action of spanning the bow, inserting the bolt, and firing it in one movement, which allowed for a much higher rate of fire in comparison to other weapons of its time. A number of different versions were designed, but the most common one during the Ming Dynasty saw a top-mounted magazine of bolts being able to feed the bow because of gravity. So a proficient user could reload it in a quick motion after firing the previous round, offering an effective range of about 70 meters and a maximum range of almost 180 meters. It wasn't quite suited to offensive campaigns and was preferred as a defensive weapon for its ability to fire up to 10 bolts in just 20 seconds, would effectively slow down assaults on gateways or doors. Number 1. Mambele. The mambele is an ornate but deadly sharp type of knife and axe hybrid weapon that were used across large regions throughout Central and Southern Africa. It is believed to have been developed from the throwing daggers of the time. These came in various different shapes and sizes, and because they were made from rare materials, they became status symbols for their owners. Typically, they would consist of a main iron blade that have a curved back section and a rearward-facing spike. The exact shape this would take depended on the region where it was made, and would often purposefully be made in a way to represent the head of an animal, such as a bird. The completed weapon would consist of 4 blades with 3 facing upwards and 1 on the side. They were usually around 22 inches long and would have been used in a rotating motion when thrown. The projectile blade would have torn deep into the flesh and potentially killed on impact or caused extreme blood loss. And when used as a dagger, the curved blade would have been thrust into the enemy in a way that made it impossible to remove it without causing even more damage. The Azandid people used mambeles as early as the first half of the 18th century. Here is our greatest of all-time binge-watching playlist. If you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 10 videos, grab a drink, snack, and get ready to binge through our channel.